Thank you very much. Just going to try to stay reasonably within my time. Thank you very much, and I'm quite honoured that that I've been invited here. That the organisers conference find that we might have something interesting to contribute. A little bit like Mark mentioned before, I feel a little bit like an imposter being here as well, because I'm not an academic. I actually never finished grade 9. I'm a plumber by trade, and you might wonder why somebody would ever leave the plumbing profession to start doing suicide prevention. And as was pointed out before, it might be obvious to some of you as well by now that I wasn't born in Australia. I was born in Denmark, and I migrated to Australia in 1988. And like so many other migrants, the first thing I did was to criticize everything and anything around me and try to make it as much as possible like the country I left. And that led me into to become a union official. So I was a union official for 13 years, and I was the secretary for the Plumbers Union in Queensland for a lot of that time. So what I want to make sure is I don't pretend to be an academic scholar. I don't pretend to have any great research to present to you here. I really rather want to make it clear that what I'm trying to do is to tell you some practical ways that we have found to implement some of all the great work that's been done by others. To find out that that some of the work that's been done can actually be work in a practical sense, as long as we're aware of what we actually work within, the industry we work within. So with some of those formalities out of the way, I just want to share with some of the learnings we've had over the last 5 years in the Mates in Construction program. As an official in the industry and as a worker in the industry, I really knew what most other people knew, that we had an issue about suicide. Not because I knew about it from books, but because I knew several people who died from suicide, co-workers and members and stuff like that. And as an official, I was involved in the industry's redundancy trust in Queensland. And we found that as much as 1 out of 5 of every death payment we paid out appeared to be suicide when we looked at the death payments. And when we talked to the superannuation schemes, they told us that the insurers of the building union superannuation scheme told them that the risk profile of that particular policy was much higher than it appeared to be the risk profile of some of the other policies they had for industry super. So a number of us says, well, that's all very interesting. We all know that. What are we going to do about it? So the first thing we did was we actually went to some of the researchers to say, let's get a bit of an evidence base behind the work we want to do. So we engaged the Australian Institute of Suicide Research and Prevention to find out whether what we had seen as workers in the industry, what the redundancy trust had seen through their payouts, and what the insurance scheme for the superannuation funds had seen was actually a reality or just a statistical blip. The Gullestrup report was handed down and found that in fact that what we saw was true, that the suicide rates in the Queensland construction industry were significantly elevated compared to other men in Australia. And in particularly, it was our young workers, the 15 to 24-year-old workers, which were at high risk. Something like 2.38 times the national average was found like that. So I suppose where I came in at that was at some stage I got sick of being a union official, and I've been going on about this suicide prevention for a little while, and the BIRD scheme came up with this. So we actually need to find a practical way to implement the recommendations we found from the Gullestrup report. And we actually want an industry buy-in in that, and that's how I got involved in it. So in 2008, the Building Employees Redundancy Trust, which is a redundancy trust in Queensland, established a program we call Mates in Construction for the purpose of implementing the recommendations of the Gullestrup report. And guess what? What we saw in Queensland, people had seen in Western Australia and South Australia and other states as well, because construction workers are pretty much construction workers no matter where we go. So the Redundancy Fund in Western Australia, Ready Fund, in 2011 adopted a Mates in Construction program over there. The Building Industries Redundancy Trust in South Australia adopted the program there in 2012, and earlier this year the Commonwealth Government have funded us to establish a program in New South Wales as well. Again, we're not claiming to do anything grand or anything brand new here. We thought, well, the best way we could do is probably just go around and plagiarize what everybody else was doing. So we looked around and said, what is everybody else doing, and what's actually working and what doesn't seem to be working, and what does it need to look like if we're going to do it in our industry? Because I tell you, for us, saying let's go to the construction industry and talk about mental health and well-being and suicide was a bit of a big step. And we thought if we come with something that looks too new or too different to what else we're doing, they're going to tell us to get stuffed. So we said we need to find a program that's already tried somewhere else, and we need to implement it into something that our industry can actually recognize as something they know and have adopted already. And for that we discovered a program called Living Works that came out of Canada and is done sort of quite widely worldwide now. We thought, well, that might have a bit of merit. Because it had a number of different levels to it, it could actually replicate the safety structure. And the safety structure is really already accepted by both parties of the industry. So if we take that, they know that already, and we can introduce this suicide prevention through that means. The other thing we got out of that was this idea that suicide prevention is everyone's business, that everybody have a role to play. And we could actually use that program to say, well, guess what? The project manager has a role to play, but so does the apprentice, and so does the builder's laborer, and so does the person in the office. So, and the final thing, I'm just going to have a bit of the final thing we found that we needed to come over was that in the industry generally, there's probably a healthy disrespect for experts and professionals generally. So if we actually were to be heard by the industry, we couldn't be either experts or professionals. We actually had to be construction workers. And we took that on as a very important mantra at what we were doing, to actually be seen as being part of the industry rather than being invited experts into the industry. So we adopted a community development approach around the Living Works model, so we could make it look and feel like the safety structure already, but around mental health and well-being. One of the factors in the construction industry in Australia, and probably most places, but we play our politics pretty hard. It's a very hard industrial scene with lots of disputes. There's lots of breaches of award conditions. People have low attachment to their employer because they're project employed. And I think like the best way to probably sum it up is we just hate each other's guts. We spend a lot of time in conflict with each other. But it meant for a program like Making Construction, we really had to be very clear on where we were. We had to place ourselves firmly within the industry so that we were accepted, but also be somewhere below the radar when it comes where the big boys was fighting, so that nobody really cared too much about us. So we had to find that place. If we were seen to be too closely aligned with the unions, it's very easy, the employers wouldn't let us on site. And if we were seen to be too closely aligned with the employers, very easy, the workers wouldn't listen to us. So we said the best place for us to be with 1 foot of either side of a barbed wire fence. And if we just kept our balance, we'd be all right. So as an industry, as an organization, we're very, very strongly industry-based. We belong to the industry, we are part of the industry. But all the work we're doing is workplace-focused. This also meant that we adopted very early on a very strict charitable model. That means that we never, ever charge for any of the work we're doing. We never charge the employers, we never charge the workers. And we rely entirely on the generosity of the industry for the work we're doing. And so far that has worked to us. It means that we have to be constantly aware of where we stand and that we are relevant and we're useful to the industry we serve, because otherwise the money is going to stop flowing and that won't be good. A little bit about how the program actually works to illustrate the model. If we imagine that that's Fred up there, and Fred is going through a tough time. He's going through a separation. He's drinking a bit more. He's a bit more careless than he normally is. But with all that stuff going on, he's still going to go to work because he's still going to earn a crust. As easy as that. What we've done in the Made to Construction program is we introduced the first level, which we call the general awareness training. And the base of that is that all workers on site, regardless of stature or whether they're management or whether they're employees, participate in a 1-hour talk around mental health and well-being. Talk about suicide as a preventable problem, talk about tip-over points and what that looks like, and what it looks like when somebody's tipping over, how we might notice it, and some good ways to start a conversation. And then how to connect people up to help. We've done that as general awareness induction because workers are already used to the fact that every time they turn up to a new site, they have to get a general safety induction. Nobody would ever be allowed on site until they've done the general safety induction. And they're used to that over their career. They might do the general safety induction 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times to work in the same industry. Similar here, we have workers who do general awareness training 2, 3, 4 times, and all it just does, it serves to reinforce the message that this is a site where we're going to care for each other. Some of the things we do when we do the general awareness training, we ask people if they want help now. And we find 3 to 5% ask for help here and now with anything from very minor problems to very large problems. We offer people to say if they want to be part of the program, they can nominate to become what we call a connector. And that is a volunteer. It's a mate who can keep you safe while connecting you to help. And we find somewhere between 20 and 30% of the workers who participate in the training nominates to become connectors, volunteers to become that go-to person. At the end of the training, we give them a white sticker. They put that sticker on their hard hat. That means that everybody on site walks around with that white sticker to remind each other that this is something we need to be aware of. It also means to take that sticker with them when they go to the next site. See, what happens now is that Fred is surrounded by people who might know what it looks like if he's not doing too well. And of course, they don't all need to notice something. It's enough that just one of them sees something and find a little bit uncomfortable about it. Now, the next level is connector training. It's done on site as well. It's a 4-hour session we run with the workers on site. We try to reach a target of a minimum of 1 in 20. Although the 20 to 30% volunteers, we don't always get that many people released to participate, but the more the merrier. A connector have a green sticker on their hard hat, and that's really important because that gives them social permission within the workplace to actually go and ask someone, are you okay? And also give everybody else in the workplace the permission to go and tell them, I'm not really sure that Fred is doing too well. Something is happening there. So it works really well that way. What we're using for Safe Talk, for connectors, we're using the Living Work Safe Talk program because we find it's a really good first step program in terms of saying, let's have the conversation about suicide. It might not actually be about suicide, it could just be about divorce or drinking or anything else. But let's have that conversation, let's not be scared of it. Now what happens is that Fred have mates around him who might notice when he's not going so well, and it becomes really easy for those mates to actually engage with help in the workplace. There's someone here now that can pick it up and do something with it straight away. The last level we're using is suicide first aid or suicide skills intervention training in ASSIST program, which we also have from Living Works. We won't run this program on a remote site. We won't run this program at all on a regional site unless the employer agree up front to have several workers trained in ASSIST, because we're not going to put connectors out there with a little bit of knowledge without anything to do with it. In urban areas where we have field officers, we provide that support directly because we've got people who can turn up on site. But the ASSIST worker is basically the suicide first aid worker on site. It's someone connectors can take people to provide the safety we need until we can get the ongoing help for them. Mates in Construction then provide a case management service afterwards, where when people are being made safe, we have social workers working with us who can then say, well, that's all right, but what got you to this place in the first place? What do we do? We need to get a mental health professional in. Do we need to get some counselling? Do we need to get a lawyer? Whatever that might be. And again, you probably get the pattern by now, but the ASSIST workers, they've got a blue stick on their hard hat, so they're recognised as well. How that works in is it means that people get the general awareness training when they first turn up on site. They got the connectors in the workplace that they can go to if they're concerned, and they're already aware of that because they have safety committees now. They know that the safety committee, the members of the safety committee are recognizable, and you can go to them if you've got safety concerns about site. So you can go to a connector if you've got concerns about the mental health and well-being of one of your mates. And finally, with a lot of the first aid officers on site, I'm quite prepared to trust them with giving me CPR if I had a heart attack. I'm not so sure about the open heart surgery. And it's the same stuff we're doing with the assist workers on site. We do the first immediate intervention here and now, and then we hand them over to professionals. So as you can see now, the model is complete. The connector have a talk to somebody. Here's the help to provide the safety here and now, and then we have the case management to back the service up to make sure that people stay in a safe place. The final thing we do is for the industry, because the industry is highly competitive. It's always the lowest tender who wins the next job. We give them a little prize if they do a good job. So sites who are actually applying with the model to the minimum standard gets what we call accredited. So they get a little logo. Here's this an electrical company in South Australia that have done it on a company basis. Otherwise, it might be a site that do it with all the subcontractors on that particular site. And if they meet that, they get that logo. They can use that logo on any of their internal stuff. They get some call flute signs they can put in the front gates. They get some stickers and all that sort of stuff, so they can actually really share with their workforce that they're doing a good job around mental health and well-being. It also serves another purpose I'm going to come to in a minute. Because one of the things we have done is we have really tried to be embedded in the industry. So for instance, we went to the Division of Workplace Health and Safety, which is our safety inspectorate, and said we'll provide free training to all your inspectors. So all the Division of Workplace Health and Safety inspectors are actually connectors. So when they go on site, with the green stick and the hard hat, and they say, well, you got your safety right here. What are you doing about your mental health and well-being safety? Because that's an issue we need to be concerned about as well. We've linked in with the Building Service Authority, which is the regulator of the industry who regulate licensing of the industry, to make sure that all their enforcement officers are connectors as well, so that when they go to someone and say, mate, I have to take the license off you, but it's not the end. There's actually some help here, and they can connect people up to help as part of that process. So we actually care for the industry generally rather than just on site. And that has made the program the done deal. It's the thing you do if you want to be a good corporate citizen in the industry, as opposed to something that a particular employer is doing on a particular site. Another thing is that having an industry-wide program makes it really easy for the employers to engage, particularly because it's free. We've got field officers turning up on site, and it's actually the local project manager in consultation with his or her local safety officers that can make a decision to run the program, because they don't have to send it to head office to get an allocation of funds or anything like that. It doesn't come off their bottom line. They're only going to lose an hour or two production, which they probably do around the site barbecue anyway. So it's reasonably easy for the program to actually spread throughout the industry. There's another thing, was when we first started, mental health and well-being was sort of something we rather preferred to ignore. One of the employers said it to me quite clearly, said, if I don't know about the problem, I don't have to do anything about it. So I'll do my best not to know about it. And that was really true. When we first started in 2008, we felt a bit like pest and cholera. Nobody really wanted us. We couldn't get on sites, and people weren't going to take the risks and all those kind of things. So it was really like pulling teeth. But certainly we got to 30 or 40 sites. And what actually happened was, it's now the contractors who don't engage with the program who run the risk. Because nobody in the industry can deny that we have an issue around mental health and well-being. So if you don't do anything as an employer, you have a duty of care towards your employees, and you actually leave yourself open for litigation later. So we've actually sort of managed to turn the thing around to some extent. The other thing is that as the program spread, to get the accreditation, 100% of the site must do the general awareness training. 1 in 20 of the workers on site must be connectors, must be assist workers on site. When the project finishes, all those workers are sacked. They're scattered all over the place. And that's obviously sad for them, but it means that the next 5 sites we've probably got 20% to start up with. And there's already workers on those sites with the hard hats and the stickers and all that, going to their project managers and say, well, we did this stuff in the last job, why won't we do it here? So that's another way that this works for us. A little bit about the industry engagement. We've done a bit of evaluation, and generally from that evaluation come out, we've got a fairly high social validity in the industry, as it's part of what you should be doing. Also shows a little bit about where our money comes from. In Queensland, where the program is probably the most established, we get 80% of our funding from the industry, either through donations or the industry funds. Quite often when employers have been naughty and they opt for a fine for breaching safety standards, they choose to donate to a charity instead. And while we don't want them to do any of that, we receive the money when they give it to us. So there's a whole heap of things where that's actually become part of the done deal that people do on site. We did a survey of 300 workers on 11 MIC accredited sites. And these sites have been accredited over a long period of time, 2 or 3 years, so it's not a sort of particular snapshot in time. And what we found was that 91% of the workers on those sites could recall key messages from the program. So when we asked them at any given time, they could actually really identify what the program was about. 95% of them thought that the training had actually given them something new. 97% that what we talked about was actually clear and understandable to them. And 91% of them, despite having had to suffer general awareness training several times, actually thought that it should be compulsory on all sites. So they actually accepted it as something that should be doing as construction workers. Of the workers who attended the sites, 95% of them felt that now they knew how to get help, and 93% of them were aware of suicide as an issue in their workplace. So, in other words, people like what we're doing. Another important thing is that and this doesn't work for the, that's all right. It was meant to be a little illustration of how one of the builders were using the program. A number of the builders then said, well, actually it's in our interest to engage really well with the program as well. So, for instance, Lang O'Rourke, which is a large national builder, have said, well, for the next 12 months, every fundraising activity we do within our sites is going to be for the purpose of making construction. So not only do people actually get the thing on site, but they actually get it through their barbecues and when they go to the Coke vending machines and order some. So it's actually not because the training we are doing is particularly good, because it's not. It's just pretty general stuff. It's actually about that the program is embedded in the industry, that people actually accept it as being part of what they're doing. Another contractor said, we're going to go out west to do some work. We need a field officer out there. Can we pay you to come out and do that? I said, no, you can't pay us to go out and do that. We don't work for money. But you can give us some money. We employ a field officer to work for everybody out in that area. So this kind of contractor actually paid for, they had 10% of the workforce, but they paid for 100% of the support for everybody out there as a way of actually putting back into the program. Here's a bit of an example of a work site that has, because one of the things that actually happens is when the program runs on site, it's actually more so what people are doing with it, I think, is interesting. This is a teeth site, and this is a daily safety briefing sheet. And what you can see here is that, I don't know how this one works, there. Over here, what they do together with their workplace, their paramedics on duty, they actually say, these are our suicide first aid workers on duty today as well. The mates and construction guys, or the mates people as they call them. At the start of the briefing, so they do the safety briefings in the morning, say who are the connectors who are prepared to be connectors today, so that let people know that if you're doing it tough, there's people actually available there to help you during the day. Another example was a site right out west. There was no mobile phone coverage, there was only a satellite phone coverage, and they had a death on the work site. An accident, and obviously it was quite traumatic. Going to take some days before the employee assistance program could get out there. So what the assist workers and the connectors did when they came back to camp, they went in, they photocopied a whole heap of mate and construction signs, and they let it be known that we're going to hang those signs up on our donga doors. And it means that that sign is on the door of the donga. It means you can knock, and I'm quite happy to talk to you if you're doing it tough. So without actually having any professional help, they said, well, this is some way we can use this program to look after each other in this tight situation we're in just now. Just to finish off, one of the things we did, we got about, at the moment, we got 34,000 or 35,000 workers in the program. We got about 3,500 connectors, and got about 350 assist workers working on those different sites. We did a bit of a follow-up with some of those assist workers that have been trained over the last 3 or 4 years, and did a bit of an interview with them just to find out how they actually felt about being assist workers within the Mates in Construction program. Interesting, 71% of them thought that being an assist worker was really compatible with their work, even though they might be a builder's labourer or whatever they're doing. So actually doing mental health was really compatible with their work, and 82% of them felt that their employer was really supportive of the role they were playing. And 96% of them would actually recommend the program to another employer. 59%, or more than half of them, had actually done suicide interventions since leaving the training as an assist worker. And combined, they had done 231 interventions. So amongst those 231 interventions have been done, with 67 interventions being done within the last 3 months. On 208 occasions, had a worker actually told them directly that they were planning to take their own life, and they put a plan in place. Another interesting thing that came out of that, and I won't go through all the details of that, was that when we actually asked these assist workers, would you be prepared to be part of a network? You are an assist worker, would you be prepared to go to another site and support a connector over on that site who might have a worker who needed help? Would you be prepared to do that? 77% of them actually said yes, I'll be more than happy to be part of a network assisting other workers in the site. So even the assist workers are actually prepared to transcend their own employer to work for the industry more generally, which we find is really encouraging. And this is a bit of brand news. This was this morning at 5:30 this morning for Suicide Prevention Day. We had a connector barbecue in Brisbane, where we just said anyone who's a connector who wants to come and have a sausage with us, feel free to turn up an hour or so before you go to work. And we had something like 50 workers turning up this morning to be part of that little ceremony where we remembered what we were trying to do around suicide prevention. And this was really meant to be the killer blow. Sorry, I'm not going to do that because my video doesn't work. So anyway, that's me. Thanks.